Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the Humanity House. Tonight's topic, as you probably know, is human rights violations and international justice. We have a special guest, Michael Liu. I'll give you the floor, Michael. Very happy to have you here.
Good evening, everyone. And good evening, Robert. Thank you for the very, very kind introduction. As Robert has introduced, I have a few hats of myself in life. First, I'm a lawyer, and then I'm a teacher. When sometimes I'm frustrated by the human rights violations around the world, I become a bartender in my own restaurant, just from time to time. But anyway, of all the jobs I do, the most proud one I do is, as a lawyer from China, I teach international human rights law at the Royal University of Law and Economics in Cambodia. As a teacher, we sometimes need to create some very creative exam papers. I do that all the time. And this evening, I first want to share one of my creative exam papers, creative exam questions with you. So the question is, the fact that there is no Asian Court of Human Rights, there is no Asian Convention on Human Rights, suggests which of the following? Option A, the universality principle of international human rights law does not apply in Asia. You never know. Option B, international human rights protection needs to be further constructed in Asia. Or option C, the Asian people are inferior to the people from the rest of the world. A little bit racist. But I deserve that. So which one would you choose? I think most of us would choose B if you want to have a high score in the class, at least in my class. But what shocked me is one or two of my students actually choose option C. I thought it was laughable, right? How could we people living in Asia, having a fantastic gourmet food every day, be inferior than the people having sandwiches for lunch and dinner? That was shocking. But then that answer later on also got me there. I'm not really this bad at teaching that I left my student with such a ridiculous impression. Or the student was actually speaking from his own heart or her own heart. He was rather innocent and rather brave. He really believed that we people living in Asia are inferior to the rest of the people for the very fact that there is insufficient protection of our basic human rights. I come from a region, it's a little bit troublesome if we talk about international justice. The countries in the Asia Pacific or in Asia, in general, have a tradition of non-engagement with international justice. Other than the fact that there is no regional human rights court, regional human rights conventions, the most developed country in the region, Singapore or Malaysia, does not even want to sign up with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Bill of Rights, and the fact that we have North Korea. Of course, there are also other examples, but another one is the Asian countries are generally in default in another very formidable international justice endeavor, the International Criminal Court. Despite the president of the court is from an Asian country, South Korea, Judge Song, which I proudly served briefly, he himself has observed that the Asian countries is probably the least represented in the court. If we look at the map of the member states or the state parties of International Criminal Court, the member states marked in green and the non-member states marked in red. It's almost immediately visible. The largest chunk of red is in Asia. I think for that matter, this map speaks for international justice in general, not only the International Criminal Court. Yet, that is not to say there is no need for international justice in Asia. The prosecutor of the court, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is very proud her office is serving the affected communities. The cases she prosecuted, the victims' numbers around 10 to 100,000. Yet in the court I argue in front of, the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, the victim number, the death toll itself, is 1.7 million. Remember, this is a very small country. The map is gone. This is a very small country in the region. If we talk about the atrocities in other neighboring countries in Asia Pacific or Asia, that number will still go higher. Of course, we should never look into too much on the numbers, otherwise we become a follower of Joseph Stalin, where killing one is a number. Killing one is a murder, killing 1,000 is just a number. But I think the number itself speaks for the imbalance of international justice around the world. Assuming all the victims of the mass atrocities, assuming them, they want to have a closure to the horrendous crimes happening on them. Assuming they want to see the perpetrators being put away. That is to say, assuming they want to see justice. If the justice is not delivered, so whose responsibility is that? To answer this question, this is a very comprehensive or difficult question. I think experts in history, in anthropology, in human rights law, they can always come up with different answers. Just to name a few here. For example, Asia never had a moment of renaissance like in Europe, where the value of the humanity or the human dignity has been reconsidered. Or like old Chinese saying goes, the winner, the king, the loser, the hooligans. So the rights and justice becomes exclusively a trophy for the winners, the victors. I'm sure there are merits in all this argument, and to some extent I agree with them. But this evening, with all of you here, I want to share a different perspective that Asian countries are not engaging with international justice. How the international justice has been perceived by the Asian countries or their people, the perception of international justice in the region. I know many of you guys sitting here are human rights experts, so I will put this gently. Does everyone agree with me that the international justice really started to flourish after the Second World War, when we have the Nuremberg and Tokyo Tribunal? I see people nodding their head. I think I can go with that proposition. So yes, it is true that the international justice started after the Second World War with Nuremberg and Tokyo trial. Tokyo trial, arguably, is the first stint of international justice in Asia. I'm going to show you a picture of the Tokyo trial. It's actually the judges of the Tokyo trial. What strikes you most when you see this picture? There's no women? Yes, that is another issue we need to be addressed with another head talk. I think at least when I see this picture, what strikes me most is the judges in the Tokyo trial in Asia. The judges not necessarily from Asia. The majority of them actually from Europe, or should I say, from the West. Imagine if you're an Indonesian and you see this picture and find out that your country has been represented by Netherlands, the very country committed atrocities in your country a few years afterwards. How would you see the legitimacy of this tribunal? What is more annoying or more disappointing is the crimes prosecuted in this tribunal are disproportionately resolving around the crimes committed by the European nationals rather than the Asian civilians. The affected communities, the victims, barely had a role in this prosecution, not to say participation, as we're now seeing international criminal courts. I think that creates a perception that the justice is a misplaced justice. The victims does not have a role. The affected communities have a very little say, therefore have little belief or faith in this endeavor. Of course, don't get me wrong here today. Especially you, Madam Ambassador, I love the Orange Nassau, Orange country who has been promoting international justice, and I don't want to drive this discussion into a very cynical, superficial, or nationalist-driven way. This is just to answer the question I proposed at the very beginning. If their justice is not delivered, who should be responsible for it? At least to me, the answer is, we should all be responsible for it. So if there is such a situation, how should we resolve it? I think, to my observation, I'm convinced that not if the Asian people themselves, we ourselves, are persuaded by the argument that we need to take advantage of international justice to secure a better world. This notion of international justice or notion of international human rights law will always be exotic, or should I say, maybe alien to us. That's why, after working with the tribunals, I founded this organization, Chinese Initiative on International Law. 2 years ago, I come to The Hague to give a TEDx talk at the Peace Palace and share these thoughts. And in the last 2 years, I have been operating in line of this thinking. One of the lessons I learned in doing this work is that it's not only who are promoting international justice, be it me, someone from the East, from China, are promoting, or someone like you from Europe, from the West, are promoting international justice. It is important, but that's not the only thing important. It is also the methodology, the approach we have to this issue that matters. To many of us, justice necessarily means prosecution, trial, verdict. But having been a salesman for the International Criminal Court, international justice in the region in China, I'm often being confronted by this challenge. If in a region or in a country there is insufficient human rights protection consistently, if the injustice is permeated in every sector, would the most advanced human rights protection theory, prosecution of human rights violations, actually work? Would it be effective? Or would it be even fair? That itself can be argued as injustice itself, because you have injustice, selective justice itself, because you have injustice, so on and so forth, and you only prosecute a few cases. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that. I don't have an answer to it either. But this is to present you the challenges I have when I'm arguing on behalf of international justice. The challenge we have is seeking justice. We must operate in and incompatible with the local dynamics. I had this thought 4 years ago in this city, in The Hague. When I finished working with the tribunal in Cambodia on Friday, I packed my luggage and I fly out on Saturday in the weekend and started to work here next Monday, right away. A very Chinese alcoholic attitude. So because of the jet lag, I wake up very early. I come to the office very early. And there was one morning, I look out the window of my office and see the skyline of Rotterdam emerging in front of my office, in front of the window. I immediately thought about the office we had back in Cambodia. I left in the rainy season, so if you work overtime there, you will see the gecko coming out to eat the mosquitoes, the head moving like this, the spiders coming out weaving their web, and the ants moving on the walls. I think at that moment, my thought was, maybe the only thing universal in these two tribunals is the case law from the Yugoslavia tribunal. Well, that more or less is a joke I had, but let me give you a real example, so you'll believe me. Let me give you a real example of from a sharp end of international justice. Let's say the court from the court I work for, the Cambodian tribunal, the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia. The name itself suggested something extraordinary, because this court was designed to be a hybrid court, where you have international sectors and national sectors, meaning the Cambodian sectors, including the judges. So unfortunately, the Cambodian judiciaries have a reputation of corruption. In Transparent International's corruption list, Cambodia ranked 146 out of some 180 countries. And the judiciary is allegedly the worst of all. Some diligent defense lawyer, which I have learned a lot from, take this further and uncovered an interview from one of the judges while he was working for a local court before he joined the International Tribunal. He basically admitting in the interview that he was taking a bribe from one of the parties. This defense lawyer uncovered this interview and were using it as a basis for recusal. The question is, should you impeach this judge because of this interview? I think most of us sitting in this room would say we have to, right, Ambassador? This is the International Tribunal. We have to presume the judges have independence and integrity. But remember, this is in Cambodia. Are you sure you can find a judge who is absolutely clear on this? And if you can, is that more important than anything else? Again, I don't have an answer to this. But then I found the decision of the chamber itself is enlightening. So I'm going to read this decision to you. In common with many countries weakened by decades of armed conflict, these provisions against corruption require some time to implement, and some have only recently been adopted. This should be viewed in the context of various systematic weaknesses which have been observed within the Cambodian judiciaries dating from the Khmer Rouge period, many of which have proved enduring. These weaknesses were well known at the time of the court's creation and were among the reasons of its establishment at the first place. Although the court cannot confront general questions of judicial independence and integrity directly, it can ensure that the accused in the proceeding before it benefit from proceedings that are fair and are conducted in accordance with international standards. Basically, this judge remains intact, let's say. Now, I will stop here with this thought-provoking decision and open our interactive debate. Remember, you're all part of the participants or invited to this Hague Talk. I would ask everyone here, every one of you members of the audience, do you agree with this decision? Do you think this is a wise and pragmatic approach to resolve this problem? Or it actually created a dangerous precedent? Remember, that is based on my proposition. We always have to seek justice incompatible and operating with the local dynamic and local apparatus. Okay? Thank you.